1059 The Region, in partnership with RE/MAX Prime Properties, present On the Market, real estate advice that works for you. Have a real estate question? Call us at 416-335-1059. Tweet us at 1059 The Region or email us at info@1059theregion.com.
This is 1059 The Region. I'm Tina Cortez with On the Market, York Region's exclusive radio real estate show. And the expert on all things real estate, Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties. Good morning, Asif.
Good morning, Tina.
Now, in a recent report from RE/MAX Canada, the findings suggested that housing inventory may reach a crisis point.
That's right, Tina. And joining us to discuss this report and provide some insight into the findings is Christopher Alexander, the president of RE/MAX Canada. Christopher, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Christopher, let's start with the headlines. We've been talking about low inventory for a long time on this show. How has it hit a crisis now?
Well, it's been a crisis for a long time. It's just what's interesting is through our research, inventory levels are significantly lower over the last decade than they were from 2002 to 2012. So, and even year over year, we're down about 7%. So, it's a big challenge that, we've been talking about it for a while, but it's really time for action. And I'm afraid if we don't act soon, affordability is just going to get way more out of control.
So before we talk about the action that's required, this report included a view on the major markets across the country. What can you tell us about the findings here in the GTA?
Well, overall, on average, we get about 29% of all the new Canadians coming through immigration every year. And as I mentioned, we're down about 7% year over year in inventory. So 29% equates to about 120,000 people a year coming to the GTA. And they're all going to need a place to live. And when your inventory is down year over year and you're expecting that immigration number to creep up year over year, you've got a big challenge on your hands.
And Christopher, CMHC came out with a report that said we needed 3.5 million new homes by 2030 to tackle this affordability issue. But Canada's only averaging 200 to 300,000 new units per year. Speak a little bit about that and what your thoughts are.
Well, when you look at those numbers, it's not hard to tell how serious the issue is. And, you couple that with the immigration numbers I spoke about, but also the trend of single household formations. So traditionally and typically and historically, you get household formations when two people decide to get married or they move in together. But we're also noticing an uptick in people buying on their own. And so that's almost, not quite, but it almost can double the amount of homes needed. So, there's a serious shortfall. And, with labor shortages, the cost of materials, the amount of it's a big buzzword, but the amount of red tape that you have to deal with to get a project approved and in motion are all detriments to tackling this challenge.
And in terms of tackling the challenge, it means building more homes. But as you suggested, supply and other issues are factors in this scenario. So what do we do in the meantime?
Well, I said earlier, let's talk more action. And I think some of that action's got to be finding ways to speed up approval processes for projects, finding ways to attract more people to the labor market, both domestically and internationally. That's a deep concern of mine as well, is that we have a number of people in the trades industries that are going to be retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. And from all the statistics that I've seen, there's not enough people getting into that field of work to make up the difference. So it could put extra pressure on the amount of time it takes to get things built.
And Christopher, when you were examining the different markets in Eastern Canada, did you find any surprises, or was it very consistent right through?
Well, surprise is kind of a tough thing because on this topic, because as you mentioned, we've been talking about the inventory challenges for a while, but just for some perspective, Halifax is a city of almost 500,000 people, and in July there were only 1,100 total homes for sale in the whole market. And so that in itself is jaw-dropping because there's a lot more people that have life-changing events that need to move. You've got people coming to Halifax from out of province because it's more affordable, but that window of affordability is shrinking with every passing day, but with numbers like that.
And the report also suggested that developers may be land banking. What exactly does that mean, and what is the impact?
So land banking is when you buy plots of land and don't develop it right away. The cost of land is at an all-time high, and the amount of time it takes to get a project approved can be counterproductive for developers too. So they may choose to wait to develop when costs go down, when approval processes improve. But we've heard the whole story, and also I know you can vouch for this, is projects have been getting canceled a lot because the cost of building is a diminishing return for developers' investment. So you've got counterproductive measures at work, and if you're a builder and it's going to cost you more to build the project than you're going to make in the end, chances are you're not going to go through with that project. So there's a lot of land that developers have, but unfortunately, through different municipal and provincial regulations, it's very difficult for them to find it worth it to start building.
Yeah, developer pullback, especially in the GTA, has certainly been at the forefront of the news. Christopher, where do we go from here? What's the next step, and how can we help with this process?
Well, I think we have to find ways to incentivize quicker development, finding ways to incentivize people to move. I've seen reports too that there's a lot of inventory that could come to the market, but it doesn't because consumers look at the cost of moving and decide it's not worth it, and they'd rather renovate. I mean, that's been a conversation for years. I think land transfer tax is a big barrier for a lot of people to get over when they think, I'd sell, but if it's going to cost me $150,000 to $200,000 to move, I'd rather put that money into something else. So those are some things that I don't think are talked about enough, that we really need to stimulate movement as the overall average stay in a home has increased from 5 to 7 years to more like 8 to 11. So that's another challenge we've got to solve as well.
Great information in this report, Christopher. If our listeners want to find out more or read the actual report, where can they find it?
blog.remax.ca.
blog.remax.ca. Thanks so much for your time, and we look forward to chatting with you again.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always a pleasure.
After the break, we check on the market in Western Canada. This is On the Market on 105.9 The Region. Stay with us.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from Remax Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KHAN. That's 416-985-5426. Or email asif@thehomeshop.ca. Now, back to On the Market on 105.9 The Region.
Welcome back to On the Market, York Region's exclusive radio real estate show. Over to my co-host and our real estate expert, Asif Khan from Remax Prime Properties, with a check on the West Coast. Asif.
That's right, Tina. We're heading west, and we're going to continue our discussion about inventory levels with our focus on Western Canada. Joining us is Elton Ash, Executive Vice President of Remax Canada. Elton, welcome back.
Great to be with you, Asif.
Elton, we're certainly experiencing a shortage of inventory, as we have been for a while in the eastern part of Canada. Tell us a little bit of what's happening in Western Canada.
Well, certainly isn't a great deal of difference when we look at Western Canada. And if we look at Vancouver, for example, where long-term inventory levels, right now we're 16% below the 10-year average of 2013 through 2022. When we look at available homes on the market right now on the Vancouver Real Estate Board multiple listing service, and then you look at what population growth has done. I mean, the Greater Vancouver area has climbed almost 25% from 2006 to 2021. So we've seen a 25% increase in population, but a 16% decrease in available homes for sale. So certainly is creating a challenge for anyone looking for a home.
Now, earlier in the show, we asked Christopher Alexander if this was a surprise. Was he surprised by the findings? We'll put the same question to you.
Well, we've been talking about housing supply shortages for some time now, and it was really exacerbated with COVID and the demand for real estate that came about as a result of that. And, we saw the escalation of home prices right across the country, especially in the major markets of the GTA and Vancouver, but in all smaller markets as well. And so, was it or is it a surprise that we see a continuation of shortage of housing? No, not really. What I think is really coming to the fore is that beyond, and we've talked about the three levels of government having to be involved with creating a more positive environment for home building. But we're seeing things, and in Vancouver right now, there's a tremendous example of partnerships working together. So last week, Prime Minister Trudeau announced a $1.4 billion CMHC funding for Squamish Nation to build 6 residential towers of rental units. That's 6,000 rental units that will come on the market over the next 10 years in Vancouver. But it's a partnership between Squamish Nation, CMHC, OP Financial, and Westbank Corporation. So all coming together to create more housing units. And that's the kind of thing we need to see.
And when we're looking at developers creating more housing units, we're also seeing developer pullback in the east here. What about in the Vancouver area? Are you seeing developers pull back and maybe cancel or postpone some projects in light of the exorbitant costs involved to build these now?
Oh, exactly. And with the Bank of Canada attacking inflation, as it has to do, there's no question of that. And the only tool at their hand is increasing interest rates. And quite frankly, the last 2 years of historical lows have been abnormal. What we're seeing now is a return to more historical norms when it comes to interest rates. But nevertheless, what that has done is introduced uncertainty in the marketplace. And when you bring in uncertainty and increased interest costs, well, then you bring about, what's the future hold? And am I, as a developer or builder, going to invest millions of dollars with uncertainty in the future? And of course, the question is no. And we look at interest costs. It's one of the highest portions or factors in building, especially a large tower project. And so, we're seeing developers just pause for the time being, postpone what their current plans are. And in Vancouver, the other factor is red tape. It will take upwards to 10 years to get approval to move forward with a major project. And so you combine these things, and here we are today of the shortage of supply.
So what advice do you have for anyone who is buying or selling right now?
Well, advice is always be patient. When you're looking at buying a home, you want to get something that's as close to what your needs and requirements are. But if one is waiting for prices to drop further, given the inventory levels that we have, and British Columbia, there was a report from British Columbia Real Estate Association yesterday that came out that is really showing the province in balanced market conditions. And so we've heard a lot of press about, how things have dropped so dramatically, but we're talking a year ago, in comparison where it was absolutely crazy. So we're in balanced market conditions, which is healthy. So that means the home that you're looking for will come on the market, and patience is always key.
And waiting for that home to come on the market, I mean, right now what we're seeing in the GTA, Elton, is a lot of people have, different ideas of where they should price their home or what they should offer on a home. What advice do you have to sellers or buyers that may be pursuing either selling or buying in this market?
Well, ultimately, the key is information, and the best information that one can get, whether you're selling a home or buying a home, is from your realtor, and the experience that they have in dealing in the market on a day-to-day basis. Their advice and guidance will be key to a successful outcome.
And what can you tell us in terms of going forward? We have many listeners who contact us who are wondering, should I sell now? Should I just wait until, the spring or maybe next summer? What would you tell them?
Well, it's always a relative situation, and you have to kind of look at your own personal circumstances. And if the timing is right at a particular time for you to be selling your home or making a move, buying a home, then that's the time to do it. Now, of course, you stay within your affordability range and you don't go beyond your personal financial means. But the timing of the year isn't as important as what is the timing within your own life and what you want to accomplish and achieve within that parameter. And then making a decision based on that. It's not so much, living in a home isn't, you don't live in a mutual fund. You don't live in a stock or a share price. You live in your home, and it's a long-term investment. And so that's why it's really key. The timing is really based on personal circumstances and your personal family goals and outcomes.
And as we close off, CMHC had said that we need 3.5 million more homes. We're building about 200 to 300,000 here. What do you think the chances are that we're going to even come close to that 3.5 million target as we get over to 2030?
It's going to be very difficult. It's a real challenge to meet those sorts of targets with the immigration goals that are in place, which, as a Canadian, we need to have immigration into this country and help those that want to come and live in the greatest country in the world. But the reality is that to meet those sorts of housing targets will be very difficult. But at the same time, when we have seen or are seeing projects like what I talked about in Vancouver with the partnerships, it's doable, but it's going to take some imagination and creativity and a desire to do it.
And for our listeners here in the GTA, could you give us a bit of a picture in terms of the average price of a home in Vancouver? What is it there these days? And we'll compare that to what we have here.
Well, it's the average price in Vancouver right now is 1.2 million, a little bit over that. It is the most expensive country in the market. And I almost hesitate, hence my hesitation when you do ask that, because it is astronomical. But again, it's supply and demand. And of course, living on the West Coast in Vancouver is a tremendous lifestyle, attracts a lot of people. And and so hence condominiums are very popular. It's in a lower price area and more affordable for your average family. But living in Vancouver is not for the faint of wallet by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it doesn't sound that way.
And Elton, where do we go from here in terms of what do you expect to happen in the West Coast to help us with housing affordability over the next few years?
Well, I think there is a desire on government, and of course, where does government receive its direction is from the electorate. The challenge that we face as politicians are often short-visioned. In other words, they worry about their elected term of 4 or so years. We have to have stronger long-term vision, and I see that happening, and so it's just a matter of information, and that's where reports like this are so critical, because it does provide information to people so that they can put pressure on their elected representatives and ultimately add additional pressure onto the private sector as well to really look at supply and housing shortages in both rental and ownership markets.
Elton, it's always a pleasure to have you on our show, and thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to have you on again soon.
You're welcome, Asif. Always a pleasure to join you.
When we come back, your real estate questions. This is On the Market on 105.9 The Region. Stay with us.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KHAN. That's 416-985-5426. Or email asif@thehomeshop.ca. Now, back to On the Market on 105.9 The Region.
Welcome back to On the Market, York Region's exclusive radio real estate show on 105.9 The Region. Time now for our listener questions. Over to Lindy in Unionville. And we've heard this question a lot. Sell now or try to hang on and sell next spring? Asif, what would your advice be?
Well, we had some great insight from Elton on this question too earlier, Lindy. Hopefully you were listening in. But what we're starting to see in this market is sellers need to be patient, because there's a lot of different opinions on pricing and what buyers are going to be offering on houses. So I think patience is the key in this market. Again, with limited inventory, this is a great market for sellers to be out on the market in. We've seen activity spike over the last 10 days or so on listings. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that your home is presented in the best light and to the most people that are out there. So there are buyers out there. This would be a great time. However, if it continues that the buyers are not serious or are not showing the true value of the homes, then you can wait until spring. But we don't know what the inventory levels will be like in the spring. If everyone is waiting for the spring, you want to beat them to the punch. So you may want to jump on right now.
So it really is an individual, situation in question, isn't it?
It really is, and it also depends on where your home is. There's certain pockets that are just on fire again right now over the last couple of weeks, but then there's certain pockets that are very quiet. So it depends on where you are, where the buyer activity is, and how much inventory is in your subdivision itself.
And in terms of selling your home, if you're thinking about downsizing, is this a good time to do that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're buying and selling, it doesn't matter what type of market you're in. If you're buying and selling in a hot market, you're going to get a lot more for your home and you're going to pay a lot more for your new home. If you're buying and selling in a quieter market like it is right now, you may not get as much as you wanted for your home or expected for your home, but at the same time, you're going to be able to buy your next home for a lot cheaper. So if you're downsizing, there's a lot of inventory out there, but there is competition in the lower end right now, because that's what a lot of people are looking at. As their buying power diminishes with the interest rates going up and the stress test knocking down their affordability, they're going to be focused on that lower end or these smaller homes. In the higher end, there's not as much competition because people's expectations or their affordability has been knocked down by the climbing interest rates. So it just depends on what you're looking at, but we can evaluate each individual situation and give you some proper feedback on that.
Our next question comes from an investor who wants to know if this is the right time to pick up commercial property or an investment property. Asif, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, this is a great time for investors to be out there because, investors buy low and then they hold on to them. And you rarely see investors coming out and competing with 10, 15, 20, 30 people to purchase their investment property. This is the time that they're out there. And that's why you hear all of these stories in the news that there's corporations coming in and scooping up properties because they know that when the market is quieter, that's when they want to come in and purchase them. Rentals are at pretty much an all-time high right now. I can't remember rentals being this competitive or for this much money. And that's what the investors are looking at. They're looking at their bottom line and what type of return are they going to get off of their investment. And that's why you see a lot of investor activity right now.
You mentioned the rental market, and I know months ago you talked about how there were bidding wars for rental properties. Is that still going on?
Yeah, I mean, there's still there's probably a lot more bidding wars, but it's also very competitive because there's a lot of people that may have been entering the housing market as purchasers, and they've changed their tune to maybe rent for a year or two to try and figure out what's happening, navigate the landscape, and so now you've got this entire other pool of people entering the rental market, as well as all the people that were there previously. Now you also have universities back in person for the first time in a couple of years or 3 years, and you've got all of these students entering the rental market. So it's ultra competitive, especially in the big cities, in the city cores, but also in the smaller towns and cities that are close to colleges and universities. You're not seeing any deals in rentals right now, and people are having to overpay or pay a lot more than what they anticipated they would be.
As a reminder, you can send your questions anytime to info@1059theregion.com. But Asif, if our listeners prefer to contact you directly, how can they do that?
They can reach me at 416-985-CON. That's 416-985-5426.
If you missed any part of our show, go to 1059theregion.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. I'm Tina Cortez. Thank you for listening.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KHAN. That's 416-985-5426 or email asif@thehomeshop.ca.